Okay, so picture this scenario. You've got a woman, she's with her husband or boyfriend, and she gets pregnant and she thinks everything's going to be wonderful. She's always pictured having a mother and a father for her child, but she's fighting with her boyfriend a lot. The relationship's not good and they break up. Either she dumps him or he just leaves and abandons the family, and suddenly she is a single mother. Tragic circumstance. You would think that almost nobody would want this to occur. More on that later. But what I want to discuss in this video is the psychology of a woman like that in those circumstances, then becoming a recruiter, trying to get other women who are currently in relationships, who currently have fathers for their children, trying to encourage those women to leave that man and to become a single mother. This is a topic that is inspired by a question I received over Hey Hero that wanted to explore the psychology of this. What I've just learned this term, social contagion. Have you ever heard that before? The idea that an idea can kind of operate like a disease and it's sort of infectious, but it's not a good idea. Like, I think that in most people's minds, outside of absolute radical feminism, which we're going to talk about in this video, but most people understand that two parents are better than no parents. And the more adults, loving adults around a child is going to be better for the child, right? Like if you have grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, all showering this child with attention and love and generosity and compassion, that child's going to grow up to be a better version of themselves. This would seem to be a reasonably non-controversial statement, but there is actually a very sad branch of the radical feminist movement that views all masculinity as inherently toxic. And so the idea of a woman dumping her husband so that she can be a single mother, that's not a cause to be sad about. That's not something to grieve. If anything, they're all applauding that. Yes, isn't it fantastic? You got away from a man. Now all of his masculine ideas and his energy aren't going to infect your child. Your child can now grow up in a pure feminine woman environment, as though the masculinity was somehow going to be harmful to the child. So this absolutely exists. It's not common, not that far out. Even most radical feminists would understand that fatherhood does have some role to play, but in terms of understanding why women would ever become to this like recruiting phase, this is one possible explanation, is that she just views all men as inherently like the enemy and they have a toxic and corrosive influence. And so, use a man for like a sperm donor kind of situation, but then just get rid of him. That's empowered. Now, that's one situation where she's recruiting other women to become single mothers, but it's almost driven from like an ideology. It's like a philosophical, it's totally wrong, but she's acting in alignment with that. For other women who become like recruiters for single motherhood, it's a little bit more practical. So we've all heard the terminology, misery loves company, right? Like if you are sad and you couldn't make it work with a man and you're a single mother, then yeah, it makes sense in the way that you don't want to be lonely, that you want to surround yourself with other people who are just like you. Like if you were part of a happy couple and now you're a single mother and you're miserable and you've got three of your closest female friends that are also happily in relationships, you're going to have less and less in common with those people as time goes on, as the memory of your happy relationship drifts further and further into the past and they continue to grow as part of their relationship. It's a horrible, horrible instinct that we all need to be aware of inside ourselves, this tendency to try and make other people feel negative emotions when we're feeling negative emotions. It's understandably human because we're flawed, but it's really, really toxic. And this can explain why some women can become single motherhood recruiters, because they don't want to be alone. They want their close friends with them, experiencing the same things that they are. This makes sense. Like, if they're going to go out back onto the dating scene, they don't want to have to do it by themselves. They want their friends to do the same thing. And, they want their friends to be available, not spending all the time with husbands. Like, come round, we'll have tea, we'll have cake, we'll gossip, our children will play together. It's very difficult to remain friends with people who are in radically different life circumstances and emotional states to you. And if you've ever heard the idea that like clocks, that are metronomes are clicking at different times, clocks will eventually sync up. Women will eventually get on the same cycle together. I actually don't know if any of that's scientific or it's just sort of a myth, but it points to that greater trend that you just see over and over again in human relationships that the longer people spend with another group of people, the more they begin to identify and align with them. We kind of have like a bit of a herd instinct, for conformity. I would say women in particular, their survival was enhanced by the adoption of that instinct. And so if you leave a woman in the company of other women who have particular emotional states and circumstances, don't be surprised if she starts to resemble them, which is why, as a man, you need to be paying attention to the company of the women that your girlfriend is spending time with. Like, if you're happily in a relationship and your wife or girlfriend is currently spending a lot of time with really bitter, angry single mothers, that's something you need to pay attention to. Could you got to see some arguments pop up in your relationship that aren't even really about any problems that you're actually encountering with your girlfriend. It's just that she feels like a sense of loyalty almost to her friends. Like, well, they're really, really struggling. I don't want to make them feel bad. Now, that can sound completely like ludicrous to a lot of men, but like, this is a gendered difference that goes back, and it's not just exclusive to what happens inside relationships. Like, if you ever ask, like, if you go to an all boys school, like, and they hand out the term papers or the latest essay or exam that they all got marked on, they'll all be shouting out, here's what I got. Like, did I do better than you? Like, there's just a competitiveness and like an understanding of hierarchy that doesn't seem to affect men at like a deeply emotional place. Like, yeah, if you do well, you're allowed to brag and all of that stuff. As men, as boys, we're kind of tolerant of that, but women can be very, very nervous to actually step outside of the socially approved boundaries of friendship. And it's not a good look to ever be like bragging. You don't want to provoke jealousy. And so some women can, this might sound absolutely absurd to you. It sounds absurd to me as I'm saying it, but some women can unconsciously start to sabotage their relationships out of a sense of loyalty to their friends. Like, I'm just like you, because they're responding to a feeling of danger of, I don't want to get too far away from them. Of course, the smartest thing to do if you're feeling that pressure is to make new friends, find some new relationships, strike up some new friendships with people who aren't going to feel threatened. But this also explains why women who are single mothers might start the recruiting process, is because they're jealous of women who are able to do something that they weren't able to do. A functional relationship is not easy. Absolutely not. It's very, very difficult. And so if you're feeling bad about yourself, though, that I wanted my child to have a father, I wanted a healthy relationship, it's going to make you feel like more of a personal failure if, while you're a single mother, you're seeing successful, happy couples, all around you. But what's going to make you feel a lot better is if you start to undermine all of those relationships and then your friends gradually become single mothers yourself, then you can reassure like, it's not me. There's nothing wrong with me personally. It's just that men are trash and relationships are difficult. None of us can make it work. And so, yeah, it's like a misery loves company thing again. You recruit people to also be single mothers so you don't feel so bad about your own personal failings. So those are all reasonably toxic, worrying motivations for women. But I will give one like good faith explanation for why I think women will do this. It doesn't mean that it's right to do it, but I think it does paint them in like a slightly better light. If a woman is so traumatized by a negative relationship, like she was abandoned at her most vulnerable, a man just took off and became a deadbeat dad, or the relationship was abusive, he was always yelling at her, hitting on her, or if he was always cheating on her, like, just paint a hypothetical situation in your mind where that was a true circumstance. If you were there, you would be like, yes, she is genuinely the victim, the man is genuinely the perpetrator. Well, what can sometimes happen if a woman has been traumatized in that way is that she can take the individual circumstances that she's experienced with a particular individual man, her unique circumstances, and she can mistakenly attribute that to all men, particularly if it's part of a pattern, like she saw it happen to her mother, with her father, whatever. She can develop this belief that this is something that is inevitable. All men are eventually going to cheat. All men are going to abuse or disappoint you in some way. Women, it's not appropriate for women to have that belief any more than it's appropriate for men to have beliefs about all women without exceptions, because they've been hurt a few times. You can't take the individual problems that you've experienced and then ascribe, blame to the entire gender. That's toxic tribalism. But while I'm not excusing that, some women do fall into that trap quite sincerely, and they legitimately have the belief inside themselves that all men are going to harm and hurt you. Now, if that's the case, you can make sense from their internalized logic why recruiting other women to be single mothers isn't them being a homewrecker or a toxic, manipulative person. No, they sincerely believe that they're saving women from a sincere disappointment, like an inevitable disappointment. He's going to let you down at some point. It's better that you see it now rather than at some point in the future. And so they recruit women to also be single mothers. So you got to watch out for this social contagion. It's a very real phenomenon that women feel this pressure to kind of conform to each other, and they want to check in and be in good with the group and not make each other feel bad by a basis of comparison. So watch the company that your girlfriend is keeping and understand that it doesn't really matter what their motivations are if they're personal. Nobody knows your own relationship. And any argument that's predicated on the idea that a person is better off without a father is wrong. They're better off without perhaps a toxic father, like if your father's going to abuse and berate the child because he's just such a toxic, awful person. Yeah, he's better off without that particular man being his father. But it should not be controversial to say that every child should have a mother and a father, or in homosexual relationships, at least two parents, one fulfilling a masculine and like a feminine role. So they get the whole spectrum of, the human upbringing. It's my perspective. Curious to hear your guys. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.